So I'm Julie James. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a few minutes. Today, we're going to talk about the Four Tendencies, which is a habits framework or framework for understanding certain aspects of a person's personality better in order to make changes in their life. And by doing sort of what your tendency might trend toward. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a few minutes. But I wanted to just let everyone know that it would be helpful if you have a pen and paper or open a note on your screen. I'm going to ask you to jot some things down that would be helpful for yourself and to get the most out of this workshop. I think if you have some goals, what brought you here today and that kind of thing. And then also because you will learn what your particular tendency is today as well. So, and so it can be helpful to write some of that stuff down so you'll have it for after the fact. But yeah, so let's see here, my slides going. So this is what we're going to do today. It's going to be a quick 1-hour workshop. I'll probably go through things kind of quickly. Hopefully there will be time for some questions at the end, and then we'll talk about next steps. So we're going to start with who am I? I would love to know who y'all are. There's a quiz that will tell you what your particular tendency is out of the 4 tendencies. We'll talk more about what the 4 tendencies are, what the individual tendencies are, what those characteristics are, and then next steps so that you have some idea of where can I take this information now that I've got it. Oops, see here. There we go. So I'm Julie James. I am a designer, a technologist, and an educator. In past lives, I have been a journalist. I do educational game design, public information, and for most of my career, it's the intersection of communications design and technology, as well as educating others to use those, use what will help them in their particular fields in terms of like, how can I harness design for what I want to do? How can I harness technology for what I want to do? And lately that has been helping women in small business establish and grow their businesses. I have taught web design, I've taught game design, writing and technology and all of those sorts of things. I'm a former educator, full-time educator at University of North Texas and Arizona State University. And I still teach when the opportunity arises there and for organizations like Stoke. So that's a little bit about me. I would love to know who's here. If you just drop a little intro, maybe do we have chat capability, Lasami? Who you are, where you're coming, where you're joining us from. And then back to those personal goals, what brings you here today? So, do you want to understand yourself better, to better relate to people, to harness a personal strength, to make a personal change, to change a habit in your life? And if you're willing to share that with each other, that would be fabulous. I need to open the chat so I can see my goal today.
Do you want me to talk about my goal, or should we just jump in?
Oh yeah, this is Rebecca. This is my sister actually joining us from the living room. Yeah, Becca, tell us why you're here. Tell us what you do and why you're here.
Okay,
she's
so
hosting a meeting.
Someone's mic was on. So I am a registered nurse by trade, and I do physician business development for a health system that's nationwide. And I am forming a team for their physician locum tenens and physician group service line. And so one of the things that I've been tapping into with regard to my sister and why I'm on this call is that she has been helping me learn the tools to get this group up and running, because that's what they have brought me on for. And so I've been implementing some of the technology tools that she's been using. So I'm interested more in setting and maintaining habits. That part of the process needs some work. So
Cool.
Becoming more productive in general. So I'll go off now.
Awesome. Thanks, Becca. So, and then we have here from Lasami to better understand her partner, who is a rebel, and she is an obliger. So everybody will learn a little bit more about what that means here in a minute. And to maintain better habits in various aspects of her life. So, so the cool thing about the Four Tendencies is they can apply to so many different aspects of our lives. The Four Tendencies is a framework developed by happiness, or she's a happiness habits sort of positive life guru named Gretchen Rubin. And she wrote the Four Tendencies to help explain how, or the different ways that people respond to expectations. So the Four Tendencies are all about how we manage internal and external expectations and what our particular tendencies can help us do to manage those expectations successfully toward habit change. This workshop's designed for those of you who want to improve your relationships with clients, coworkers, students, if you happen to be an educator in your family, and then personally, because I am all about helping women and small business owners grow their businesses, but to be able to do so in a way that simplifies our lives, so that we can, what I like to say is get more done in less time with less stress. And not because my goal is not to help us be able to do more and more and more in our lives, but actually to be able to do more of what we need to do so that we can live better lives and not have to do more and more and more to kind of feel the grind of that hustle constantly. By the end of this workshop, you should be able to identify the Four Tendencies themselves, identify what your tendency, or if you're here on behalf of understanding someone else better, also their tendency perhaps, and how to relate to that. You might be able to make a habits change in your own life or suggest new ways for other people around you to work together. So perhaps if you're a leader on a team, that might be something that you want to do. And recognize that the tendencies exist on a spectrum. Personalities are big and broad. And so while these personalities have a tendency, not one thing works for every one person. You know, we have differences in what works for us. So you should have jotted down your personal goals, and then we can go over quickly. I'm not going to take too long. Sometimes this is a part of the workshop where we would pause, and I won't go too quickly, but everybody go over to happiercast.com/quiz. And it's an 8-question quiz, I believe, on that will help you identify what your tendency is. And so as you're going through the quiz, remember to answer the questions for generally how you respond to certain situations rather than thinking about the exception. Just think about kind of where you best fit. Which one sounds most like what I might do, even if it's not specifically exactly what you might do in a particular scenario. So take those really quick, take that quiz really quick. I'll wait a few minutes. And then perhaps, or not perhaps, once you take that quiz, would you please drop in the chat what your tendency is? So I already happen to know mine, so I'll drop that in there.
Oh, I'm an obliger too, Julie. I think we knew this about each other. Cool. Great. Got a lot of questioners in here too.
That's interesting.
Looks like we're at obligers and questioners. How would you compare this to like the Myers-Briggs and like other personality tests?
So for me, the Four Tendencies are just really functional in a specific context, right? And so there are personality frameworks that will go, and you can get very deep with the Four Tendencies, but what I really like about the Four Tendencies is I can put I can understand my tendency very quickly. I can understand the, what might work and not work generally for my tendency, and I can make a change very quickly, that I can see the impact of that in my life very quickly, right? And so the way I understand other personality frameworks, depending on the purposes and stuff, is they can get really deep and kind of tell you who you are. And yes, Amanda, you'll be able to access the replay for sure. And I'll send an email with some more resources and stuff like that. I see. If you can't stay, don't worry. But the behavior-based practicality of the Four Tendencies is what I really like about it. So other than that, I can't speak real deeply about other personality frameworks, that kind of thing, but that's what I like about the Four Tendencies. So, and it looks like we have a lot of people who have taken the quiz, and we have it looks like we're split between questioners and obligers. I haven't seen, although Lasmi, I think you did say that your partner is a rebel.
He is, yeah. It's an interesting life.
So the cool thing is that obligers make up the largest tendency of the Four Tendencies. So there's obligers, questioners, upholders, and rebels. So we come in, and this is based on a survey in 2016. Was that of the people who had taken the quiz, obligers are the largest, followed then by questioners, and then by upholders, and then finally by rebels. And so I'm not surprised that we were pretty much split among those two tendencies. So and so it looks about like that. Although I guess we didn't have it. I didn't go through real deeply. Was it 50-50, or do we trend just a little bit more toward obliger, I wonder? In general, with a larger sample size, that's probably what would happen. And so again, as I mentioned, here's the tendencies and kind of what the framework looks like. So everybody has a particular tendency that they will fall toward, but then again, because the tendency is on a spectrum and things are related, we might tip one way or another. So as an obliger, there are ways that I definitely tip upholder, and then there are ways that I can spot the obliger rebel in myself, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. So, and as a questioner, someone might tip toward an upholder, or they might also tip toward rebel, and so on and so forth. But a question that can come up commonly is, what if you got the same number of answers for two tendencies? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a mix of two tendencies. Most often you have a feeling of what does characterize you more one way or another. But lots of people do have sort of a split. So I have a thing that happens to me with particular expectations, internal versus external, and what that means for when I might tip toward an upholder versus a rebel. Whoops, sorry, clicking the wrong button. So basically, expectations are all around us, and the Four Tendencies framework helps you understand, how do you respond to expectations. Inner expectations are those that we set for ourselves, that we might think about, a personal goal. Outer expectations are those that respond to external accountability. So an inner expectation that I might have, I could set for myself. I mean, well, one expectation can go either way. So I might set an expectation of myself to exercise 20 minutes, 3 times a week. And I might have that internal expectation that I never do communicate out to an external framework. So I'm accountable to myself for that. On the other hand, I might go join an exercise group where we decide to meet together as a group to exercise 20 minutes 3 times a week. Then that expectation, and you can have them simultaneously, but that becomes an external accountability framework for that particular expectation of exercising 3 times a week. Other expectations are things like work deadlines, doctor's orders or even a request from a friend or family member. And then, you know, whether they're in or out, or their internal expectations are those ones that we place on ourselves. So we've talked, you know, you've heard all of these things. What does it mean for each tendency? Someone who is an upholder will readily meet internal and external expectations. So this person might not have any trouble setting that personal exercise goal for themselves and joining an accountability group to meet that. But say the accountability group doesn't meet sometime, an upholder will probably not have any trouble going out and still getting that exercise done. An obliger is a person who can readily meet external expectations, but can resist those internal ones. They might struggle that way. So an obliger in this scenario might always show up on time for that exercise accountability group. But if the group doesn't meet, that obliger probably won't go exercise for themselves, right? Because there isn't that external accountability anymore. A rebel might say, I'm not joining a group. You can't make me do this. The rebel might not also be able to make themselves do that and meet that expectation. So a rebel might be someone who says, okay, I want to exercise 20 minutes 3 times a week, right? But I can't make myself do it. And if I join a group, well, that makes me want to do it less because I don't want to show up and have people telling me what to do. However, a rebel might be a person who then can change their habit based on sort of an identity framework. So if I feel like I want to be a person that part of my identity is to be healthy and exercise, then suddenly I am successful at that. Whereas if I don't feel that, then I might have a lot of trouble, whether the accountability comes internally or externally. A questioner is a person who might resist those outer expectations. So a questioner might never join an exercise group, but makes that personal decision that I want to meet this expectation. So I'm going to do this. Or I join that group, but I don't join that group for accountability. There might be a million other reasons why I joined that group, the social aspect of it, another friend, that kind of thing. But as soon as I feel like, if I'm a questioner, as soon as I feel like something has been placed on me, if there's something I have to do, I might then start to resist that external thing. But if I've set that inner expectation for myself, I'm not going to have any trouble with it as a questioner. And so that's kind of what the framework looks like. Let me stop here. Are there questions so far? And I haven't looked at the chat for a second. Oh, we have a rebel finally. I didn't see Heather's result until right now. I love it. No upholders. Cool. That's interesting. Let me see here. Okay, so Rebecca suspects her colleague is a rebel. Oh, I kind of went through this. Okay, so I went through the discussion forgetting that I have these pretty colors. So to talk about this, how do I work closely? The one with how to handle, Rebecca, so you're asking how to handle someone. You're a questioner and you're working with a rebel. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? So why learn about the 4 tendencies? Well, that kind of gets at Rebecca's question. It's so that I can deal better with myself, achieving my aims for personal happiness, to harness my strengths, to balance the negative aspects of my tendencies. So if I know suddenly why, as an obliger, I have so much trouble meeting internal expectations, then suddenly I can say, okay, but I want to exercise. And if my group doesn't meet, I don't want to be reliant on them for my success. So now I can understand that about myself. What are the habits that I could put into place that might help me still meet my own expectations? And then like Rebecca's talking about, so if I understand myself and I understand someone else, then how can I deal better with other people? And this can work really well for us because we don't exist in vacuums, right? We exist on teams. We have clients that we work with. We have families and social groups. So understanding your tendency and others can help you work more effectively with other people, to have less conflict in your relationships, to experience less burnout personally and to collaborate and communicate more effectively with the world around you. So, kind of looking at our time. So the strengths, okay, we will go back. The strengths of an upholder is a person who tends to be reliable, is interested in rules and regulations. So if you know rule followers, I have one at home that is a rigid rule follower. This is how she lives her life. And it helps her make sense of the world around her, and she really likes it. She wants to follow the rules. She wants to know where the lines are. She wants everybody else around her to do that too. I'm talking about one of my children. Upholders are very self-directed. They don't need other people to motivate them necessarily. And upholders, this is an interesting point that I'm just coming across. Upholders tend to experience less burnout in their lives because they readily can meet their own inner expectations, including those inner expectations that we have to rest more, to be able to say no, to take care of ourselves. That aspect of an upholder personality helps an upholder to experience less burnout and resentment in their lives. So a weakness, that rule following can be a weakness, right? So that can be something that if you're so rigid in rule following that you run up against maybe someone who doesn't operate that way, or to try to achieve an end goal that suddenly doesn't fall within that framework, or you might have to go outside of that framework to get something done. It's going to make it really hard to be in the world around you. An example of in the workplace, this can be a manager who doesn't want to accept work after deadline because the deadline is missed. So that might not be, deadlines are important, but the fact that the deadline is missed might not be the most important thing. However, this framework, this aspect of a person's personality can kind of cause them that kind of conflict. In our children, it can look like a kid who is really, really, really concerned with everybody else's behavior and what's going on. That can be really distracting for someone. Upholders can be impatient. They can find it hard to be sympathetic. So these are things that then, okay, so what does that mean? That doesn't mean that you're a callous person, right? That does mean that you have to understand yourself better in order to then kind of talk yourself through relating to the world around you or achieving your goals. Let me see here. And then we didn't have that many upholders. So let's go to where there are more of us fell into, which there were quite a few questioners in our group. So the strengths of questioners are very inner directed. Questioners are really interested in data, and data helps them really make the decisions that they want to make. They're fair-minded, interested in creating systems and being efficient and effective at work. Questioners, because of questioners' need for data, questioners are willing to play devil's advocate, which can really be helpful in, thinking through problem solving and that kind of stuff. So a questioner is willing not just to gather a little bit of data here, but then to also look at the alternative ideas and gather all of that data as well before making decisions. Questioners are comfortable bucking the system if it's warranted. So a questioner might not need, can see rules, can see the logic of following rules, but also wouldn't necessarily need to follow a rule to a fault. So a questioner might very well accept that late work after deadline because they know now that work is better than it would have been, say, if it had come in before. And so then the possible weaknesses of that, well, needing to gather so much data causes a questioner this thing commonly. I hear this from people who are questioners. But it's the analysis paralysis. I don't know when I've gathered enough data to make my decision. I want to gather more. What if there's something out there that I don't know yet that I need to know? A questioner can be impatient with others. And maybe this is what's happening to you, Rebecca, because you're saying that you're a questioner and your colleague might be a rebel. So your colleague might not feel the need to meet any expectations on your team. And that makes you very impatient because you think that everybody should be following the same process, and that's causing y'all to have that conflict. Questioners might not be able to get that closure on a matter. That goes back to that analysis paralysis, because questions might remain unanswered. And questioners might feel like, okay, so these are the questions that I need answered. Other people might need different questions answered, and a questioner just might not see the value in those questions, right? And so that also can cause conflict. Let me see here. We'll go over to obligers. And then obligers, our largest one. Okay, so we're going to go to rebels. So the strengths of obligers meet those outer expectations, have trouble with those internal expectations. Obligers are great bosses, responsive leaders, great team players, great family members, feel obligation to meet others' expectations. Obligers are generally responsible, willing to go the extra mile, and respond well to external accountability. Weaknesses, on the other hand, obligers have trouble meeting their own internal expectations to a fault. So obligers commonly run into burnout. I see Lasmi smiling. Obligers commonly run into burnout because saying no is not easy. If I have that external accountability that I'm responding to, and I really get jazzed by responding to that external accountability, it is a lot harder for me then to make decisions that balance my calendar, because I want to say yes to everybody, right? But what I'm having trouble with then is saying yes to myself, because I haven't, given myself a reasonable balance in the amount of things that I've decided to do in any given amount of time. Obligers can tip toward obliger rebellion. So what does that look like? An obliger rebellion kind of comes up. So a personal example for me might be work. I've done that thing on my calendar that we've talked about. Everybody has asked me to be on a project, and I've said yes to every single one. Then I am feeling the tension at home because my time and attention is divided, and my family is upset about that. I'm feeling the tension at work because I'm having trouble meeting deadlines, maybe because I'm working on so many things. Maybe I've started to miss meetings. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not, eating well, whatever it is. And then suddenly I quit everything. That's obliger rebellion. Suddenly I'm like, screw everybody's expectations. But it doesn't come out in a normal, like, oh, I should just dial it back. When you're in obliger rebellion, it's more like all of us, for me, it looks more like a temper tantrum. I'm not doing anything for anyone ever because everybody wants too much from me. But what has happened is, because I'm an obliger, I've gotten myself into this situation. So that's kind of what obliger rebellion can look like. Obligers can become resentful because of this and have trouble saying no and imposing limits. Obligers that tip upholder can have a clearer sense of their own capacity and have a greater ability to say no. So what's funny is also because we exist on a spectrum and our experiences inform who we are, while you wouldn't change tendencies throughout your life, you might change how you tip. So when I was younger, I tipped quite a bit more toward obliger rebellion, and experience has taught me, and tools and practice has taught me how to do things like be able to say no and have a better sense of my own capacity, that I tip more toward obliger upholder now. And that's kind of what that can look like. And then finally, our rebels. We love our rebels. Rebels resist inner and outer expectations. So rebels are independent. These are their strengths. Able to think outside the box, can be unswayed by conventional wisdom. Rebels are willing to do things their own ways, regardless of what social convention says. And rebels can be spontaneous. So weaknesses of rebels are that they are likely to resist when asked to do something. They can be uncooperative. Many rebels have trouble accomplishing tasks that need to be done consistently the same way every time. Boring. Rebels can act like ordinary rules don't apply. So that's going to really cause some trouble between some rebels and some upholders. They struggle with routine and planning. They can often feel very restless. They don't want to settle down, and can be indifferent to reputation. Now, that can probably be a positive and a negative, depending on what you're looking for on a team or in your life. So, so I'll stop there now. So now knowing a little bit more about the tendencies, what does everyone notice? What do you drop into the chat? If you notice something about yourself, or if there was a revelation about someone around you.
Can I just ask straight out?
Yes. Oh yeah, you don't have to drop it in. I say that a lot because people don't always want to talk, but absolutely jump in.
Okay, so if you have a team that's highly process driven, right? And so you say the things about a questioner, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I like this job. It's very process driven. That's how I teach it. And then you have other personalities on the team that might not fit. You know, maybe a rebel is not process driven. Are there a lot of project managers who are rebels? Does that fit? And could you use that when you're hiring on your team and look for specific personalities that will go with this highly process driven, deadline driven environment? Like, well, maybe do you not want rebels on your team, or do you not?
Well, do you know what I mean? With a rebel, I think I do get what you're asking. And so, but with a rebel, the thing is, if a rebel identifies, like has the identity of a person who is very process driven and gets a lot out of that identity, then a rebel's going to do well, right? A rebel might even be an asset such that a rebel might say something like, why are we doing this way? We've done it this way, but here are some suggestions of ways that we can do things differently. You want that on your team, right? Everything doesn't need to change all the time, but that's how a rebel can be an asset to that team. The problem is understanding the rebel enough to understand that about them. And do they understand that about themselves? So if you have someone on your team that doesn't identify that way, what is that person's identity? What is it? What are their values? What matters the most to them? Then can you work things in such a way that you're emphasizing those things? So if that rebel values social interaction, what are the ways that we can interact together, right? That lead us toward our common goal. Is that rebel goal oriented? You know, does that rebel have different?
That makes complete sense. Okay.
Right. Let's see what else. So Renee says she's a rebel and questioner, almost split, but definitely says she feels rebel with questioner leanings. Lots of me wakes up in obliger rebellion. That is totally a thing. I have woken up that way too. F the world, I'm pissed today. You don't change your tendencies, but you can learn to tip in other directions. Is there a mention of what influences the formation of our tendencies and what age they start to solidify? So I'm not sure what age they start to solidify, but I do know from reading Gretchen Rubin's work that it is hard to tell the younger a person is. But somewhere in high school or young adulthood, things do start to get solidified and you can start to see tendencies. So I have a kid at home that I was like, is she rebel? Is she questioner? Is she upholder? And I realized it felt rebel because she was resisting so many things, but she's very upholder because she has a particular set of rules that she follows. I just didn't understand those rules yet, right? But anyway, and then the things sort of that cause things to tip in other directions. So as an obliger, I have trouble meeting internal expectations. So I need an accountability partner. And sometimes my calendar is my accountability partner. That is not a tool I had when I was young, right? Sometimes my future self can be my accountability partner. So I've gotten myself into obliger rebellion enough times to know that that's really uncomfortable and I would like to avoid it now that I know it happens. So I am accountable to future Julie who doesn't want to be in obliger rebellion, right? Sometimes we just need to take those shifts and then suddenly I have the ability to meet expectations in a different way, right? And it's not that I can't meet an internal, or it's not that I can meet an internal expectation all of a sudden, it's just that I've set a new accountability partner, right? I haven't turned into an upholder, but I've turned to an obliger that can uphold more of her own personal expectations kind of thing. My family, if I don't work, my kids can be an accountability partner, right? They don't even need to know it. I just know that if I get into obliger rebellion, it's really unpleasant for them. And because I value something like being a present and attentive parent, then my kids can become an accountability partner. My spouse, not as much of a good accountability partner. We are willing to let each other slide enough that I know that like that we can do things together. But if I have something and I say to him, I don't want to eat nachos for 6 months, if I feel like eating nachos, I'm going to do it. If I say that to him, if I say it to someone else, it might matter more, right? It's little things like this. Let's see what else. As a questioner, I do research and listen. Yep, that sounds very questioner right there, Denise. And Marisa, it's good to see you, by the way. I'm really glad to see you here. Getting out of obliger rebellion. Been in obliger rebellion mode for a couple of weeks. So getting out of obliger rebellion, so for me, a list is a tool that helps me do that because I then communicate all of that stuff that's happening in my head, all of that chaos, whatever it is, and I just write it out on a list. So what are the things that are going on and what are the ones that feel like they're triggering that rebellion the most? Then I can go methodically and say, okay, so where do I need to make changes? Do I need to cancel some things? Do I need to put my tail between my legs and say, you know, I made a commitment that I have now reevaluated and it turns out I can't meet this commitment well, or, you know, or maybe I'm going to make a suggestion that somebody else, you know, it turned out I thought about that. I thought I could take it on, but maybe XYZ could do it better, something like that. Or I can look at my kids and say, right, this is a thing that happens. You know what, you guys, I filled up my calendar and I know we're all feeling crazy. I'm feeling crazy. I kind of want to quit life, but can we get through this week? Then what am I going to do to set that external accountability for myself so I don't get back into that situation? Sometimes you got to dig yourself out of the hole, and it's just a matter of accepting that and then putting it out on pen and paper and saying, okay, what am I going to do to get out of this hole? And then what am I going to do to not get back in it?
I guess I have a question with
Yeah.
that. For me, it's not necessarily that I'm overscheduled.
Mhm.
It's just there's a lot going on situation-wise. So I'm kind of underperforming at work and everything, but my calendar isn't exactly full. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I
So
can't really eliminate things.
So it still might be a matter of needing to write through that and getting some clarity on what is happening for yourself, right?
Okay.
Because without knowing that, then it's hard to know what change might help you get out of that.
Got
The
it.
awareness of it, super important, right? Just that you can say, okay, there's something going on here, is super helpful. So, you know, I go to the calendar because that's my default mode, is to overbook myself. What's your default mode? What happens? What's the pattern? When did you last feel like this and what was going on then? You know, some of those kinds of questions and writing that out might really help you spot, oh, this is what is coming up. And so what's a change I can make to address that?
Got it.
Julie, I have a question as well.
Yep.
I'm a questioner, and
I'm not even shocked, Marcia.
so as a questioner, what happens is like when I find myself going into rebellion, especially in not meeting those, those that both the outer and the inner expectations, because if I feel myself where I'm not meeting an outer expectation, then I get like disappointed because I'm like, it's the inner expectation that I'm like, as I didn't do something I said I was gonna do. So then I get like frustrated inwardly. And so how can I shift that to move more towards like the questioner upholder so that I'm doing both? I'm meeting the outer and the inner.
So I guess this is similar to what I just said to Marisa. I think it's what is the identifying that conflict, like what's at the core of that? Is it that I have an expectation that internally and externally is at odds? Is there a value there that is that's misaligned or something like that, right? And are there behaviors that are contributing to me getting in that situation? So then sort of thinking through that and, just bullet points or something like that, just writing all of that out and then kind of looking at what comes up. Maybe there's a way that I can then rearrange some of what I'm doing to be more in line.
Thank you. I think as you were saying that, some of it may come from, I think like maybe like you talked about like the productivity, like the planning part of it. And I do find that when I use my schedule and schedule things more and look at how I'm spending my time, that I do move more into being able to meet both my outer and inner. And I'm finding that out because like when I schedule, okay, I'm starting to schedule, this is my time, like I'm gonna go exercise. This is my time, I'm gonna work on my client, work on clients' work, do certain things. And as I do that, I see that especially when the questioner, like this, the systems part of the questioner, that and the need to have the data, that might be something as what you just said made me kind of think about that. So that may be something that may help me.
I wonder if, because you're really comfortable when you can quantify all of that and you can take a look at it and the things that you're doing fall within that framework. So is it that you're running into the conflict when stuff is falling outside of that framework, right? Is it that you just have to accept that happens sometimes, or is there a way that you can work it into your framework better?
Yes.
Right? Those things might really help.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. So now we have a quick but fun pop quiz. And so I have some mottos, and these are mottos that align with the tendencies, and we have to guess which tendency aligns with which motto. So the first motto, you're not the boss of me. And you can drop it in the chat or call it out.
Rebel. Is it rebel?
Rebel. Very much.
Rebel.
Discipline is my freedom.
I would think that would be an upholder.
Upholder. Don't lose sight of why.
A questioner.
A questioner for sure. You're going to do what's right, even if people call you uptight.
Upholder.
Upholder for sure. Convince me why, then I'll comply.
I'm gonna go with rebel. Convince me why.
Questioner.
Questioner.
Ah, okay.
A rebel can't be convinced.
Oh, got it.
They're going to be contrary for the sake of being contrary, right? I'll do everything you ask of me until I won't.
Oh, man.
Hmm?
Obliger.
Obliger for sure.
Obliger. Mhm.
Yes. You can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me.
I would say upholder.
It's an obliger.
It's an obliger. I'm counting on you to count on me. I need you to meet those expectations, even if it, even if it's a personal one. It's so hard when I have to. It's so easy when I want to.
A rebel.
A rebel. Very good.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter why for a rebel, right? Your lack of planning is not my emergency.
Is that an upholder? Like they don't care? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had a boss that used to say that all the time.
Pardon?
I had a boss that used to say that all the time.
And that boss is screaming upholder.
Your procrastination is not
It's not my, yep,
for me.
yep. Because I feel like it.
A rebel.
Mm-hmm. For sure. May the bridges I burn light my way.
That must be a rebel.
Yep. If I have to, I will. But if I want to, I won't.
Maybe an upholder?
Mm-mm,
No. Is that a rebel again?
mm-mm.
I think it's obliger.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh.
that's the
Oh,
difference
listen,
between the external and internal.
I have to know.
If I want to, I will. If I have to, I won't.
Is that a rebel tendency?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we have just a couple more. Because I said so, I don't think so.
Is that a questioner?
It's one of them. This is two tendencies.
Oh.
Oh.
Is it a rebel as well?
Mhm, mhm.
Ah, okay.
You're a rebel.
A rebel can't think themselves into doing something. They can feel themselves into doing something. If I feel like it, right? If I identify this way, if I have this value, it's very. But if I should just get up and go exercise because it's the right thing to do, I can't make myself do that if I'm a rebel. Justification leads to motivation.
Questioner.
Questioner.
Mm.
And why do we need a motto?
A rebel.
Nope.
It's not a rebel. Is that a
Oh.
questioner? Why
It
do
is
we-
a questioner. So a rebel, I don't need your motto. A questioner,
Okay.
why do we need the motto?
Why do we need the motto?
Mm-hmm. So as we're wrapping up, a couple things. For you, what's a good motto for your tendency? Did you relate to one of those, or does something come to mind? And what do you like or dislike about your tendency now that you've learned a little bit more about it? A couple of quick things, myths. So if it works for me, it's going to work for someone else. This is not only a myth because we might have different tendencies, but again, within the same tendency, we exist on, there's that spectrum. So just because using myself as a future accountability partner works for me doesn't mean that would work for Lasami, right? Just because it doesn't work great for me to have my partner as an accountability partner, or my husband as an accountability partner, doesn't mean that would be for Lasami. It's common that your spouse is not a great accountability partner, but for some that might work really well. If it works for you, it should work for me. And if it doesn't, I need to change. Right? If it works for you, maybe it'll work for me. If it doesn't work for me, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to change at all, right? I need to find the tools that work well for me. That's all. Everyone should use X tool. Obviously, that's not necessarily true. People should definitely be able to try lots of things. But that doesn't mean that one thing's going to work really well for everybody else. Just like there are so many ways to do things, right? How many to-do apps are there out there? How many frameworks for getting things done are there out there? You know, so just because one works for someone doesn't mean it will work for someone else. But everybody in general should be able to find a framework or tool that does help them create better accountability. So, and then thinking back to your personal goals and what you've learned about your tendency, reflect today. What can we take away from today? And what are you going to do differently, perhaps starting tomorrow? Becca, did you have an insight on how you might relate to that rebel at work? And perhaps she had to step away. Did someone else have an insight?
I just want to, I have an insight, just something I want to share, because I
Mhm.
invited my sister Denise she lives in Charlotte, to this
Okay.
the call today, and we are both questioners, and it's
Oh, how interesting.
because we both ask different types of questions, and
Mhm.
sometimes her questions annoy me. I'm like, why is she asking all these questions? And they annoy me. And she's like, well, you know, I ask questions. So it's like what you were saying, just because we're both questioners,
Mhm.
we have a different way that we ask questions and use those questions. And I was surprised. I was like, she's a questioner, but she is a questioner because she asks a lot of questions.
That's funny. That is very funny. So my sister, Becca being on the call here, and she's a questioner and I'm an obliger. My husband is also a questioner. I have the one child I was telling you who I think is an upholder, and I'm sure that there's one who is a obliger and one who maybe might be a rebel. I don't know. But she might, like Lasmi is saying, start every day in obliger rebellion. I'm not sure. It is kind of funny. So, well, I really appreciate y'all being here today, and you can sign up for my newsletter at juliejames.com. And if you sign up, I also will email Lasami. I have a couple of one pagers or just kind of like quick nutshell guides. There's a nutshell guide to the Four Tendencies, as well as tips for habit change. And the tips for habit change are kind of divided up by tendencies. So there's some suggestions that would work really well depending on where you fall. And so that might also be helpful as you are learning more about the Four Tendencies and making change in your life. And you can buy the Four Tendencies book. So it's not necessary. There's tons and tons and tons of resources online, but if you're interested in learning a lot more, the book is out there by Gretchen Rubin. And come to Stokes Coffee and Combos on Tuesday morning. I believe I'm up next week or maybe the week after. So I want to spend the rest of this year in my coffee and convos. They're at 9 a.m. on Tuesday mornings, virtual, just like this workshop, talking about the Four Tendencies and harnessing them and making changes in our lives to live better in 2022. So if you come find me on Tuesday morning, Lasmi posted the link to Stokes events. And actually, I do have the link to stop my screen share. I have the link to my newsletter sign up that I will post right here too.
Where do we see the replays for these? Are they on the YouTube link?
So for this one in particular, it will be on Facebook. So this was Facebook live stream, so you can rewatch there. And then eventually we'll get the recording on YouTube.
Okay.
Mhm.
There have been some that I missed that I wasn't able to make. I wanted to go back and check it out.
Yeah,
Hi,
thank
Julie.
you.
I love
Hi,
seeing
so
you.
good to see you today. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I want to make it to all of your talks. I just
I would love to
we
have you
fill our
around for
schedules.
sure. Yep.
Well, thanks so
Cool,
much,
but
Julie. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
you're welcome. I was gonna say Stokes Facebook page and YouTube are both tremendous resources with lots of great stuff from previous presentations from all of their amazing mentors.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have like an amazing network of entrepreneurs and experts in their fields. And I love that you're talking about the Four Tendencies today, because that's a great setup for the rest of 2022 for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So your next Coffee and Convo is on March 1st. So if you'd
Yep.
like to hear more from Julie, go to the stokedenton.com/events link that I dropped in the chat. And there's a lot more in there as well. But yeah, this replay is available on Facebook now, so you can go ahead and check it out if you'd like. So yeah, thank you so much for today's Lunch and Learn, Julie.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye.
Julie.
Bye.
Bye.